Think of a seed. What is it? It's actually a seed, yes, but if you think like ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle, that seed is also potentially a plant. Whether it becomes a plant or not depends on various different factors. First, it must be planted in soil. Then it must receive all of the elements that will promote its growth. The soil will need nutrients, for example. It will need sunlight and it must be watered. If these factors are realised over time, the seed that was potentially a plant will cease to be a seed and actually become a plant. If the seed receives none of these elements, it will die, and its potentiality will not be realised. Now think of a human seed being planted in the soil of life. Humans are similar to plants on the nutritional level. They require nutrients, sunlight and water in order to grow, just as a plant does. If the plant receives these things, it will grow to become a good example of a plant. This is not the case for humans, however. Although attempts are often made to convince us so, nutritional growth alone does not result in humanity. Why is this so? For Aristotle, the plant's function is nutritional. It takes in nutrients and it grows. If it does this well, it achieves its purpose. The human function or purpose is more than nutritional. It is tied to the nature of the human as a rational creature. And the exercise of reason, humans make choices that are consistent with their function or not. In this sense, we should not only think of the human as the seed passively receiving nutrients from its environment, but also as the gardener who tends to the seed. Now, just as the gardener must not only make choices about how best to tend to the seed, but must also take action, human activity is also necessary for one to achieve their function. And just as the gardener aims to grow the seed into a plant, or the archer aims the arrow at the target, Aristotle believes that there is a goal toward which human action aims. This is identified with the use of the Greek term Eudaimonia, usually translated as happiness. However, we have already established it is more than a fleeting sort of happiness that the English word usually identifies. Eudaimonia is human flourishing. It is this that all human action aims at. Although just as we have gardeners who fail to assist the plants in growing, or archers who fail to hit the target, it is possible that we also have humans who fail in their activity to achieve what they aim for. So how might the gardener or the archer ensure that they will achieve what they aim for? By training and habituation. It is well established that for one to perfect a skill, one must practice, and according to Aristotle, this is no different for humans who aim at humanity. This is only perfected with training in intellectual virtues and the habituation of moral virtues. What are these two vital growth elements, intellectual and moral virtues? The intellectual virtues are cultivated by way of teaching and learning. They train the mind in reasoning and wisdom. They consist of two types. Theoretical wisdom, scientific knowledge and intuitive reasoning as theoretical virtues, and practical wisdom and technical skill as practical virtues. The moral virtues are qualities of character that are formed through habitual activity in accordance with reason. In particular, practical reason. As the plant must be cared for and watered continually by the gardener of the soul must practice moral virtue. And just as a plant will require a different level of care at different stages of development, the human soul requires that the virtue is practiced at the right amount and at the appropriate time. Aristotle insists that this right amount is a mean between two vices. For example, the man who is wealthy can practice the virtue of generosity only if he gives in the right amount and at the right time. If he gives too little, he is miserly. If he gives too much, he is wasteful. And the amount that is given by the billionaire, if it is even possible to be a billionaire and be virtuous, and the shop worker on minimum wage must be substantially different. Yet both practice the same virtue. And for the purpose of establishing the level at which one must act in order to practice the moral virtue, we rely on a well-formed intellectual virtue of practical reason. We are beginning to find that Aristotle relies on a particular view of the world that is not unanimously accepted within philosophy. Some even say it is alien to the way the modern person thinks about morality. Why is that? The famous fresco of Italian painter Raphael, The School of Athens, in the Apostolic Palace of the Vatican City shows a mature Aristotle in the centre with his former teacher Plato. Plato is depicted pointing to the heavens as a representation of his belief that the universals exist in a realm of forms. Universals are those properties in the world that are present in multiple instances, such as circularity in a circular thing, or humanness present in humans. Plato believed that there must be actual instances of these existing in some heavenly realm that we are acquainted with before birth. Aristotle is depicted in disagreement, with his right palm turned toward the ground, a gesture that represents his belief that universals are to be found only in the instances in which they appear. For example, redness is in the red apple. This is an essential principle in Aristotle's ethics because he relies on the universal concepts of the function of human nature, Eudaimonia, and the role of the virtues in living the good life being applied to all individuals. Once Aristotle's universalism is disregarded, as it was in the nominalism of William of Ockham in the 12th century, ethics becomes action-focused because there can be no universal end of human activity that applies to all, only distinct atomistic actions of the individual. And this had a profound effect on the introduction of casuistry to Christian ethics, a legalistic emphasis on specific actions as sinful or virtuous based upon a set of rules. The Bible is then seen as a rulebook that should be used to guide behaviour rather than a narrative concerned with the relationship of the human purpose to divine nature. It also should not be too difficult to work out how these nominalist ideas affect the ethical thinking of today. Still, we are in danger of going too far off course with this discussion, but perhaps you can let me know in the comments what you think of these issues. Like all good stories, Aristotle's tale contains a twist. Indeed, he spends so much time identifying and analysing the moral virtues such as courage, patience and temperance, that we might be led to believe that his claim that eudaimonia is activity in accordance with virtues is applied first and foremost to ethical activity. However, this would be a mistake, for the practice of moral virtues in accordance with reason serves a higher purpose, and that purpose is the exercise of the intellectual virtues, what Aristotle ultimately refers to as contemplation. For when the virtues are all in line, the greatest of these is wisdom, and it is only in relation to the other virtues that this can be exercised as contemplation. In summary then, humans are like seeds with the potential to become plants. They need the correct environment, but they must also be like gardeners, who tend to the seed and ensure that it gets the correct nutrients and in the right amount. And if these factors are in alignment, the human will grow, like the plant, to be a genuine example of humanity, and will be free to live the highest form of human life, that of contemplation.